The year of 1988 was a mixed bag financially for Paramount and the Friday the 13th franchise. On one hand, The New Blood did get the franchise back to being number one at the box office. On top of that, after premiering in the fall of 1987, Friday the 13th, the series had wrapped up its first season in 1988, and planning for a second season was already underway after strong ratings. However, any financial momentum The New Blood had died down after the first weekend, and while the film was still profitable, it ended up making less than Jason Lives did at just $19.2 million. To add insult to injury for Paramount, Nightmare on Elm Street 4 would release just months after The New Blood and did far better at the box office, making nearly $50 million throughout its theatrical run. At this point, the reality was undeniable. Freddy Krueger wasn't just challenging Jason to be the king of the slashers, he had firmly taken hold of that title. Paramount once again needed something to bring audiences back to see their hockey masked icon. The pressure to do something different and fresh was on. Despite the tense atmosphere of The New Blood, John Carl Buechler had interest in returning for Part 8 and even had a concept in mind. His pitch would see Lara Park Lincoln returning as Tina, with the character being locked away in a mental hospital and being accused of the murders of Part 7 when Jason himself shows up. However, as covered in my Part 7 review, the relationship between producer Barbara Sachs and Buechler was not good at all, and she squashed any chance of Buechler's vision becoming a reality, with Buechler going as far as accusing her of blackballing him. Lara Park Lincoln even wrote her own script for Part 8 and pitched it to Frank Mancuso, but it got rejected. Her idea would have seen Tina grow up to become a psychologist, counseling kids with powers like her when Jason comes for her. While Paramount did want her to return as Tina, the offer was so low that Lara considered it insulting, and with that she exited the franchise. Kevin Spertos also pitched his own script, but he was also rejected. So, who would lead the next installment in the franchise? Rob Hedden would be hired to write and direct Part 8. Hedden already had familiarity with Barbara Sachs and Paramount through his work on Friday the 13th, the series, but admittedly did not have much familiarity with the movies. The first thing he did upon getting the gig was rent all 7 movies and watch them. After that, he came up with a new idea for Friday the 13th. Take Jason out of Camp Crystal Lake and put him somewhere new like a city. He pitched this idea to Frank Mancuso Jr. and Barbara Sachs. It was Frank who suggested New York, and with that, Jason Takes Manhattan was born. With that, Hedden got to work on the script, with his pitch seeing Jason get to Manhattan via cruise boat, taking a group of Lakeview High School graduates there. Jason would get to Manhattan at the end of Act 1, and the rest of the film would see him go to the Brooklyn Bridge, have a boxing match at Madison Square Garden, attend a Broadway show, and climb to the top of the Statue of Liberty. Sounds great, right? Well, if you've seen the movie, you know none of that stuff happens. Paramount executives would go back to Hedden with the reality that he only had a $4 million budget, and the movie would only be able to afford to shoot in Manhattan for about a week, with the rest of the Manhattan segment of the film being shot in Vancouver, Canada. As pre-production went on, Hedden would see more and more of the Manhattan segment in his script whittled down, and the cruise ship segment stretched out. Hedden would go on to admit that he had to put his foot down and fight for Paramount to allow him to even use Times Square and the New York Harbor in the film, which luckily is a fight that he won. On top of all that, scheduling mix-ups just days before filming was set to begin caused them to lose out on the cruise ship they were initially planning on using, so Hedden had to scramble to find another boat in a short amount of time. He did, but one that was only half as big as the original. On top of all that, the film went over budget, which certainly didn't make the executives at Paramount too happy. Despite some challenges with the production, though, pretty much everyone involved with Jason Takes Manhattan has nothing but positive things to say about the experience. This was especially due to Rob Hedden, as he apparently created a really fun, energetic, and positive atmosphere on set. Also, as the film went over budget, he was pressured by executives to cut corners that he felt might threaten the safety of his cast and crew. Hedden refused to do this and threatened to walk away from the production. Rob Hedden seems like a pretty likable guy, and it's great to hear that the production process was positive for the most part. But how did the film turn out? Oh boy. Well, just a warning for any hardcore Jason Takes Manhattan fans out there. You may want to turn this video off now because this review is going to be pretty negative. With that out of the way, let's get into it. But even for this film, there are a few positive things I get out of the experience. For one, the whole scene with Julius and Jason boxing on the rooftop, with Julius getting his head punched off, is really cool. Originally, that scene was supposed to take place at Madison Square Garden, but it was nixed. So, Rob hadn't decided to keep some version of the scene in, and personally I'm glad he did, because at the very least, The fact that Jason Takes Manhattan has a signature kill is something that can't be said for The New Blood. When it comes to stuff we actually do get in Manhattan, it's pretty well done. The shot of Jason in Times Square is awesome and pretty iconic, and there are a few fun moments like the boombox scene.
Living in the city ain't no big deal. Living in the city ain't no big deal. You gotta have a heart made of U.S. steel. If the crack don't get you, then the hookers will.
You a dead meat, slime bag. Yo, man, it's cool. It's cool, man. It's cool.
And the hockey billboard scene that I get some genuine enjoyment out of. Sadly, that's all I really have to say about the positive feelings I have towards this film. Now, let's get into the issues. Okay, well, I understand this isn't an uncommon complaint. Let's get this out of the way right off the bat. The title of this movie is a lie, as is pretty much the entire marketing campaign. This isn't Jason Takes Manhattan. This is Jason Takes a Cruise to Vancouver before stopping in Times Square for 5 minutes. But I guess that title would have been too long. If you don't know, even much of the stuff in Manhattan, like the alleys and the subway, were filmed in Vancouver. From my understanding, the only real New York stuff we get is Times Square and the New York Harbor. As I said in the opening, this isn't entirely or even mostly the fault of writer-director Rob Hedden. In his original script, he had Jason going to the Brooklyn Bridge, Madison Square Garden, and the Statue of Liberty. If you think the Times Square shot was iconic, just imagine the shot of Jason standing on top of Lady Liberty, or just imagine how cool the boxing scene would have been had it actually been in Madison Square Garden. No, I put the blame more on Frank Mancuso Jr. and Paramount. Frank is the one who suggested Jason Takes Manhattan, yet when the time came, he didn't want to provide any of the resources needed to make even some of Hedden's vision a reality. Hedden had to fight tooth and nail to even get the minimal stuff in Manhattan that did make it into the film. He threatened to walk away if Times Square and the New York Harbor were left out, and luckily Paramount gave in. Still, it doesn't make up for the lie the audiences sold going into this movie. If they couldn't provide the resources to make the idea work, then changes to the title and marketing for the film needed to happen. The fact that it didn't was a huge slap in the face to the audience. But honestly, most of that could have been somewhat forgivable had the cruise ship part of the movie at least been entertaining. Sadly, it isn't. It's an absolute slog to get through, as you were just jumping around to these different things these characters are doing, none of which are all that entertaining. From Tamara and her friend doing drugs, to the guys boxing, to Tamara and Wayne trying to blackmail Mr. McCullough, it just felt like they were trying to fill time until the next Jason kill or when they get to New York. The only part of the cruise ship part of the movie that I found even somewhat entertaining was when they realize Jason is on board and become a mob to find him. But even then, that's over in the blink of an eye. So yes, sadly, once again, most of the pacing for this movie is terrible. Maybe things wouldn't be such a slog to get through if the characters were better, but very much like The New Blood, the characters are either very forgettable or just plain unlikable. Again, I understand that Mr. McCullough, played by the legendary Peter Mark Rickman, and Tamara are supposed to be intentionally unlikable, but when they are the only memorable characters of the entire film outside of Jason, that is a bit of a problem. Mr. McCullough in particular is one of the biggest douchebags in the franchise, as he just snaps at everybody and tries to control every move our final girl and his niece makes, thinking he's the only one who can protect her, which we come to find out later he certainly hasn't earned the right to think of himself that way considering his previous actions. While Tamara is just Melissa from Part 7 but with a drug problem. The rest of the characters are just bland cookie-cutter very one-note slasher characters. Wayne is the film nerd who wants to desperately fuck Tamara, and that's all we know about him until he gets killed. While it leads to easily the best kill of the movie, the only thing we ever learn about Julius is that he's this tough guy boxer. JJ is the punk rocker chick, and she could have been a fun enough character to spend time with, but then she's killed shortly after the cruise takes off. Eva is Tamara's friend who seems very uncomfortable with Tamara's behavior. The only other thing we know about her is that she has a science scholarship. Also, we get a new Crazy Ralph type character with a ship worker as he warns everyone about being the last ones.
Where's the radio?
It's dead.
You're all gonna die. You're the last ones. He's come back for you. What the hell are you talking about? Jason Voorhees.
It's never really explained what this means in the version we get, although the deleted scenes make reference to the fact that Lakeview High is closing down and the graduating class going on this trip is the last class ever before the school closes. They removed that part of the story from the film, but kept the new Crazy Ralph's last ones rambling in for unclear reasons. It doesn't fit with the Jason character. He's not Freddy. Jason just wants people to leave Camp Crystal Lake alone. So to add this to the movie just to make this new version of Crazy Ralph more interesting is a slap in the face. I was pretty hard on the characters in the New Blood, and I stand by that, but at least they were a bit more entertaining and memorable than this. Sadly, this even extends to our final girl this time, Rennie, played by Jensen Daggett. There's some evidence to suggest that they wanted Lara Park Lincoln to return as Tina, and that is a direction I would have much preferred. But once Paramount lowballed her on the offer, a new final girl was brought in. Frankly, I don't find Rennie as a character to be very interesting and never have. To be completely honest, I find her to be the most bland and forgettable final girl in the entire franchise. Even the story they try to give Rennie, with her being afraid of the water for mysterious reasons and seeing hallucinations of child Jason, I don't find all that interesting. The idea itself isn't a bad one, but the problem is the hallucination scenes look terrible. In some of them, Jason is just a normal kid, not deformed at all, which goes against everything we know about the character. But maybe it would have been better if they took that approach throughout the whole movie, as when Jason is deformed in some of these hallucinations, it's also very inconsistent in how deformed he is as well. The makeup effects look terrible. All this leads to a payoff that makes no sense whatsoever. Somehow, like 8 years prior to the events of this film, Rennie was taken out on Crystal Lake by her uncle, Mr. McCullough, for a swimming lesson. He scares her with stories of Jason before pushing her in the water like an asshole, where child Jason pulls her under even though he drowned literal decades before Rennie was even born. Yeah, even for a franchise like Friday the 13th, which has never cared much about continuity, this is new levels of nonsensical. It feels like a very forced way to try and give Rennie and Jason this deep connection, and I don't think it's very successful. As far as the other aspects of her character, like her relationship with her teacher, Miss Van Dusen, and her romantic relationship with Sean, I wasn't buying it. The relationship with her teacher is supposed to be one of the most important in her life, yet I don't feel the emotion there. Near the end of the film, Rennie's actions lead to the death of her teacher, and she shows almost no emotion over it. If it's possible, the romantic relationship in this one feels more forced than the one in Part 7, as Sean and Rennie have even less chemistry than Tina and Nick did. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear. I have absolutely nothing personal against Jensen Daggett. Everyone who worked with her on this film seems to have positive things to say about her as a person, and I'm sure they are true. But I have to be honest, guys, I don't think her performance as Rennie is very strong at all. For most of the film, her acting is just so bland, wooden, and emotionless, and when she does have to show some emotion near the end of the film, it's not convincing in the slightest.
You get me in the leg, and you're not gonna get me now.
Overall, I'd say this is in competition with Part 3 for some of the worst all-around acting in the franchise, and that definitely shows with Rennie. This time, though, unlike with The New Blood, Jason is a negative of this film for me. It's notable because for the first time we actually have someone returning to play Jason a second time. The thing is, it almost didn't happen. Barbara Sachs and Frank Mancuso Jr. were ready to hire a Canadian stuntman when Kane Hodder picked up the phone and called Sachs on a whim. It was during this phone call where he said he was interested in playing the character again, something Sachs apparently didn't know. Once he agreed to essentially work for the same money as Part 7, the deal was done. However, the first problem I have with this Jason is simply I don't care for the look of him at all. He's wet, slimy, and green throughout the entire runtime of the film. I don't know why they didn't just reuse the look from Part 7, but in my view, this is a huge downgrade. While I don't think the mask is terrible by any means, I can say that I don't care for the piss yellow color it has to it. All this leads to his unmasked look, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is the worst unmasked Jason look in the entire franchise, and even the people working on the movie agreed. One of the special effects assistants admitted that he would call this Jason the Jack-o'-lantern, and it's true because that is what he looks like, a slimy green disgusting pumpkin. I'm sorry, but I don't think Kane Hodder's performance here adds much to the character, and he's not bad by any means, but his performance doesn't save the movie. In fact, I'd say the whole heavy breathing aspect he brings to the character actually hurts the product overall. There are times where Jason sounds like Darth Vader, and to be completely honest, it doesn't really work for me. So yes, sadly overall, this Jason is a pretty big negative for me. Slasher fans will forgive a lot if the kills are decent, and sadly, outside of the boxing kill, these kills are just totally bland and forgettable. They aren't watered down quite as much as the New Blood, but honestly, they are awfully close. This was partly a creative choice by Rob Hedden, and partly the MPAA getting involved and gutting another Friday the 13th film. Either way, for all the other flaws with this film, it needed some gnarly kills to save it, and sadly, these ones just do not deliver. Getting dipped in toxic waste isn't a brutal enough end for Mr. McCullough. Now that leads us to the most ridiculous and nonsensical ending in the entire franchise. Rennie, Sean, and Jason are down in the sewers, and the entire sewer system in New York apparently fills with toxic waste every night at midnight. That, in and of itself, is hard to say with a straight face. But then Jason ends up drowning in the toxic waste as we hear child Jason scream for his mommy not to let him die, before adult Jason reverts back to a child for some reason. After seeing this film several times, I still have no idea what this ending is supposed to mean. Even the people involved, including Kane Hodder, don't like the ending. It seems like Rob Hedden didn't have a clear idea either, just wanting an ending that would be something different. Well, it was, but much like the rest of the movie, it makes zero sense. There was even a version filmed where child Jason is seen inside of adult Jason's mouth while drowning. Very weird. This movie also saw the complete exit of Harry Manfredini. That's right, even his previous work on the franchise is not included here. Fred Mullen takes over sole composing duties, and while I've slowly warmed up to The Darkest Side of the Night, just don't think his music fits with this part of the franchise. He also did the music for Friday the 13th, the series, and personally I think his music and style fits much better in that show with its eerie, creepy, entirely supernatural premise as opposed to the slasher side of the franchise. So sadly, I have to say that even the music in this movie is a downgrade. So obviously, guys, I think this is the worst that the Friday the 13th franchise has had to offer so far. Anything positive I get out of watching it is few and far between, and the fact that this movie doesn't live up to its name, has bad acting, awful characters, bland kills, a subpar Jason, an uninteresting final girl, and a nonsensical final act drags it down to the bottom. This is truly the one Friday film I will almost surely never watch again after this review. Now, it does seem like this movie has a growing fan following, as I've seen more and more Manhattan Defenders come out in online Friday the 13th and horror communities. Well, that's great, and if you consider yourself a part of that, I'm glad that you enjoyed the film and can enjoy something that I just don't. But I've given this movie multiple chances, and it's just never gotten any better for me. I'm going to have to give Jason Takes Manhattan a 1.5 out of 10. But that's going to do it for me today, guys. What do you think of Jason Takes Manhattan? Are you as low on it as I am? Or are you someone who is actually a defender of this film? No matter what side you'd fall on, I'd love for you to give your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Okay, take care.